I'll never forget the sound of the front door slamming shut behind me. It was sharp, metallic, final, like a coffin lid being nailed down. The echo carried through my chest and rattled my bones, leaving me standing there on the front porch with nothing but a battered old suitcase and a hollow ache in my chest. The air smelled of damp leaves. Autumn had come early that year. The wind cut through my thin sweater, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. I stared at the house that had never truly been mine, and listened to their laughter trickling through the cracks. To them, this was a victory. They thought they had finally rid themselves of the nuisance they had tolerated for far too long. I clutched the handle of my suitcase tighter. My palms were sweaty, but my expression didn't betray the storm inside me. My aunt's shrill voice floated through the thin walls. Good riddance. Let her rot out there. Maybe the streets will finally teach her a lesson. My cousin Melissa chimed in, her voice smug and sharp. Don't worry, Mom, she won't last a week. People like her never do. They thought I was finished. Broken. Homeless. Forgotten. But what they didn't know, what they could never have imagined, was that the very same day they threw me out with nothing but a suitcase, I would be holding a check that could turn the world upside down. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I would no longer be their victim. I would be a millionaire. And one day, when the time was right, they would regret every word, every sneer, every ounce of cruelty they had poured into me. I wasn't always this hardened. There was a time I believed in love, in kindness, in family. That was before my world cracked in half. My mother had been everything to me. Warm, soft-spoken, with hands that smelled faintly of lavender soap. She died when I was 17, gone in an instant, a car accident that left nothing but a twisted wreck on the highway and a hole in my chest so wide I thought I might never breathe again. My father, well, he didn't stick around long after that. He vanished like smoke in the wind, leaving me with no one. At least, that's what I thought until Aunt Linda and Uncle Charles swooped in. To outsiders, they looked generous. They took me in, as they liked to brag, parading their charity around like it was a medal of honor. But I knew the truth. From the first night I slept in their guest room, I understood I wasn't family, I was baggage. Linda, with her lacquered nails and perfume that clung to every surface, treated me like an intruder. Don't get comfortable, she told me the very first morning. You'll pull your weight here. No freeloading. Charles wasn't as openly hostile, but his silence was worse. He spoke to me only when he had something sharp to say. You're nothing like your mother, he'd remark, shaking his head like my existence was an insult. And Melissa. Melissa made it her life's mission to remind me I didn't belong. She was a year older, prettier in that polished, plastic way, with expensive clothes and friends who mirrored her cruelty. She never raised her voice, but her words sliced like razors. Don't sit next to me at school, she once hissed. People already pity you. I don't need them thinking I'm your babysitter. Meals were tense, always filled with subtle digs. I ate last, sometimes only scraps. Birthdays came and went without mention. If I needed clothes, I got Melissa's cast-offs, usually stained or ripped. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, swallowing my tears because crying only gave them ammunition. In those quiet hours, I clung to the one small act of rebellion I could afford, buying lottery tickets. It wasn't hope, not really. It was escape. Each ticket was a whispered prayer, a fantasy scribbled on a scrap of paper. I'd sit on my bed, journal open, tuck the ticket inside, and imagine a different life. A life where I wasn't invisible. A life where I mattered. For years, nothing came of it. Until one morning, everything changed. It was a gray Thursday when I pulled the crumpled ticket from my journal. I'd almost forgotten about it. My hands trembled as I compared the numbers to the announcement scrolling across the tiny screen of the second-hand television in my room. 1 match. 2. 3. My pulse quickened. 4. 5. 6. All of them. Every single number. I dropped the ticket, my breath catching in my throat. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I had misread. But no, the numbers lined up perfectly. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the bed, clutching the slip of paper like it was life itself. I had won. I didn't scream. I didn't run downstairs and shout it to the heavens. No. Instinct told me to stay silent. Because if they knew, if Linda or Charles or Melissa had even the faintest clue, they'd find a way to take it from me. So I went about my days like nothing had happened. I washed dishes, I folded laundry, I endured their insults. But inside, something had shifted. A seed of power had taken root, growing stronger with every breath. The day they threw me out began like all the others, with cruelty served for breakfast. I was scrubbing the kitchen counters when Linda stormed in, her heels clicking like gunshots. "Look at this mess," she screeched, though the counter gleamed. "You're useless. At your age, still sponging off us. Have you no shame?" Charles appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "She's right. We're done. You've been nothing but dead weight for years. It's time you fend for yourself." Melissa lounged on a stool, scrolling her phone, sipping overpriced coffee. She smirked without looking up. Kick her out already. She can't survive a day on her own. Their decision came swift and merciless. Clothes stuffed into a suitcase, shoes thrown on top. My journal with its hidden secret barely made it inside. Charles shoved the suitcase into my arms. "Out," he barked, and slammed the door behind me. I stood there, the autumn wind biting my cheeks. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering. Shame should have drowned me. Fear should have crippled me. But all I felt was a calm, icy fire. That afternoon, I walked into the lottery office. My heart pounded as I handed over the winning ticket. The clerk gasped, eyes wide. "Congratulations," she breathed. Papers were signed. Cameras flashed. And then the check was in my hands. The ink gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and with it, my future. I walked out not as the girl they had discarded, but as a millionaire. And right there, standing under the fading sun, I made a promise to myself. They would pay. Not with fists, not with shouting, not with petty revenge. I would dismantle them the way they dismantled me, quietly, completely, until there was nothing left but regret. I vanished. New apartment. New clothes. New name. I hired financial advisors, lawyers, and mentors. I learned to grow my money, not waste it. Within a year, my fortune doubled. I kept tabs on them from afar. Melissa's glossy world cracked first. Her Instagram perfect lifestyle ran on credit she couldn't afford. I bought the debt collection agency that held her account. She never knew the faceless letters demanding payment came from me. I repossessed her car, leaving her stranded outside a salon. Her friends drifted away, the shine of her image tarnished. Linda was next. Queen of her social circle, she thrived on appearances. I bought the catering service she adored, then deliberately sabotaged her events. Wrong deliveries, spoiled food, humiliations she couldn't recover from. One by one, her friends abandoned her. Charles? His pride was his job. 15 years at the same company. He bragged about his stability, his authority. What he didn't know was that I bought controlling shares under a shell corporation. Slowly, quietly, I cut his pay, stripped his responsibilities, and watched as his career crumbled. He came home one day with a cardboard box, his pride in shambles. 2 years later, the perfect opportunity came. A charity gala. They were desperate to attend, clinging to relevance. I made sure they got invitations, not knowing the event was mine. I arrived in a gown that shimmered like starlight. Cameras flashed, voices hushed. When they saw me, their jaws dropped. Melissa whispered my name, pale as paper. Linda's lips trembled. Charles looked like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't acknowledge them. Instead, I stood on stage and announced a $1 million donation to support women escaping toxic households. The applause roared. Their humiliation burned hotter than fire. That night, as I stood under the chandeliers, surrounded by people who saw me, not as baggage, not as nothing, but as someone who mattered, I felt whole for the first time. They threw me out with nothing but a suitcase. But that was the day my life began. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't shouting back. It's rising so high that your silence becomes the loudest sound they'll ever hear. The end.